Hello, everybody. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again, to our Strength Asia, talk series here. And this is our final talk in our four-part series, the 4 Rs of the New Era. Welcome, everybody. My name is Kimpong, and I am the CEO and founder of Strength Asia. And what Strength Asia does is that at the very core of everything that we do, we help organizations like yours and mine, create a culture of engagement. And by engagement, what do we mean by what do we mean by that? I'm sorry, my tongue is kind of tripping up. What do we mean by that? Essentially, we help people, to become more influential, to be more impactful, to be more satisfied, to be more energized in the work that they do, and also in their relationship and collaboration with one another. Once again, everybody, welcome. This talk is being streamed, live on Facebook Live. At the same time, is going live here on the Zoom platform here. So anytime you want to kind of communicate with me and say hi, do a comment or whatever, go ahead and use the chat box in Zoom and go ahead and use the comments, on Facebook Live here. So welcome, everybody. Like I mentioned today is the last talk in our series, entitled The 4 Rs in the New Era. And the new era, really is about, what we are currently going through right now, in the COVID pandemic. And of course, when everything, hopefully it's over soon, the post-pandemic season. And we've been talking about the 4 different Rs: re-envisioning the business, restarting, the workplace culture, reframing, purpose of our life and the organization. And today we are talking about reinvention, reinventing our life, all over again in the midst of what we are going through in this current season, COVID or not. And when we talk about reinvent, I think really we are talking about 3 simple ideas, right? How do we deliberately and consciously make a pause in our life to stop and take stock of what is going on with our lives today, look back and ask ourselves, what is going well, what is not going so well, what's going really awesome for me, what is it I like, what is it that I hate, right? And then begin to ask the question, right, given the purpose of my life, given the purpose of my organization, how do I do things, how do I get ready to transform myself and begin to evolve to become the bigger, better person of who we already are. So today, I was just, thinking about, how do I actually share this talk with everybody. Now, for the past 3 talks in the 3 Rs, really what I've been doing is, talking a lot about, the various frameworks or even principles or ideas, on how to reinvent, reframe, and realign and all that, right? And last week, if you were here with us, where I talk about, reframing our life purpose to our organizations here, I talk about, in order to find your purpose, we essentially ask 3 very simple questions. What do you have? Where do you want to go with what you have? And what are you going to do about it? And, as I'm thinking about today's talk here, I was telling myself, hey, maybe I'll do less of the frameworks and the, how to do this and all that. But perhaps maybe I'll share with you a little bit more personally, on 3 stories, from my life that's really got a lot to do, with reinventing my business and reinventing my personal life here. So, today, sharing with you 3 stories, from my life here. So the first story, starting all over again, right? Starting all over. Now, a number of you may not know this, but for those of you who knows me for a very long time, you will know that at one stage, of my life, I started with a company called Soul Garden. Now, for those of you who are in Singapore, you will know what Soul Garden is. In fact, if you're in the Philippines, you're in Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, right? You would also know what Soul Garden is, because today Soul Garden is all over these countries here. And once upon a time, back a long time ago, I was part, of what do you call it? I was part of this company called Soul Garden. Now, starting all over, one of the craziest things that can really happen to anybody in our lives, right, is that you devote all your time, you devote all your life, you devote all your energy to making something work and work really, really well, only to find that, as you're getting closer to the target and to the goal, you kind of realize that, hey, success is not within your reach. You're probably going to bomb out, or you're probably going to fail really, really spectacularly, right? And that's exactly what happened to me, between the period of 1994 to the time of 2001. And it was a time, when I was in Soul Garden as their managing director. So at a point in time, I was just in my 30s, right? And I was given this really, really, amazing task of becoming the MD for Soul Garden. And my task was really to transform the business, and then to put Soul Garden, on the map. In other words, grow it beyond Singapore. Now, I was 30 plus years, I was in my mid-30s at that point in time. I've never ever had the experience of running a restaurant before. But the job, sounded really, really exciting for me, and I was really, really, energized by the prospect that I could really steer the direction of a company that I never knew before. In any case, those 6 to 7 years, they were really, really exciting times of my life, but they were also spectacularly, right? One of the most, in fact, I think it's the most stressful periods of my life here. And between 1994 to 2001, there were three events, that's happening around the world that I think really, in some way or another, really, added on the additional stress to my already really incredibly stressful job here. And it was, between the year of 1995 to the year 2000, that was when, the dot-com boom began to start, So back then, it was still a brick and mortar days, but starting from 1995, internet becomes a big thing. Business on the internet becomes a big thing. And people were just throwing crazy money to build websites, build internet businesses without knowing what they were doing. And they were basically driving the value of the stock market really without any basis, without any fundamentals. And it was just on pure speculation. So between 1995 to 2000, dot-com boom. In the year 1997, it was the Asian financial crisis that happened, that started with Bangkok and then spread to the rest of Asia here. And that really caused the banking system to really contract and get into a lot of trouble, and a lot of businesses were closed down during that period. Capital flows were restricted during that time in 1997. And then in between the year 2001 and 2002, the dot-com boom became the dot-com bust. All of a sudden, the bottom fell through and this whole entire stock market crashed. And you know that, right? Financial crisis all over again. So I was the managing director of this little tiny company called Soul Garden, which is a Korean barbecue restaurant, at that point in time, trying to grow it, transform it, and put it on the map. And in the meanwhile, the world around me is just going ahead, charging ahead, without me any control in it. Well, what happened? The whole Soul Garden era, right, essentially led me, to a burnout back in the year 2001. I worked 6 to 7 long, hard years. I devoted my life, my time, my every waking hour. Essentially, I was working so hard to transform the business. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the business tremendously. I enjoyed working with the people there tremendously. I enjoyed transforming the business from a sleepy, traditional Korean restaurant into a full-service table barbecue restaurant, right? Which now has the capability of expanding beyond the shores of Singapore, of which I must proclaim I have no part to that. It's all done by my previous partners here. And I say, hey, Andrew, well done. Good job. All right, cool. Now, so anyway, come 2001, I was totally burnt out, because at that point in time, I realized that no matter how hard I was working, how hyped up I am, how determined or resilient I was at that point in time, I knew I wasn't able to hit my goal of transforming the business and putting it on a map. And the stress was so much that eventually I had burnt out. Now, for those of you who have ever burnt out in your jobs before, you know exactly what I mean, right? When you burnt out, you just feel that all of a sudden, everybody around you just abandons you. You just become, probably the loneliest person in the room. You just felt like, for all the work that you have done, for everything that you have put in, it felt like nobody cared about it. Nobody really is interested, in the work that you have done, in the contributions that you have made. And at a point in time, back in 2001, when I left, the company in Seoul Garden, I felt extremely, extremely lonely. And it was an incredibly, confusing period of time in my life. And at a point in time, there were three things, that has the ability to beat me down, and I also have the ability to keep me down, right? It became really accentuated and very magnified for me. And those three things were regrets, failures, and sudden loss here. And I want to talk a little bit about regrets, failures, and sudden loss. Now, what are regrets? Well, regrets are something that, I would have done and I regretted doing it. Or they could be something that I would have missed out on doing, and I go like, my gosh, why didn't you do that, right? So there are things that I've done, or things that I may not have done or missed out on, that I regretted doing so or not doing so. That's regrets. And I'll tell you, the experience of regrets for me, going through a really, really tough 6 to 7 years of building a business, and only to find that, look, I've burned out and all that. There are many things that I regret, in my job here, things that I have done, things that I wish I did not do. And, regrets is like a fish hook that hooks, onto your mouth and kind of pulls you, right? And the craziest thing about regrets is this: you thought you are, going on, with your life all over again, right? You're gonna start anew and all that, and all of a sudden, somebody on the other end of the line, just kind of give it a tuck and pull you right back to where you started. And regret is really, the kind of what do you call that? The kind of entrapment, right? That keeps pulling you back to your starting point, and you're starting from ground zero again and again. And that was a really painful thing for me, because I think when I came out, just remember, I was burnt out. So mentally, I was a little bit zonked out. I felt like I was the loner in the room here. I felt like nobody cared. And all I could look at, right, was looking back and say, oh my gosh, while I can see all the wonderful things I've done in the business, all the transformation that I've done in the business, I cannot help but keep looking at all the regrets of my life. Do you know why that is the case? Because our brain, the lizard brain in us, right, the ancient brain in us, it is hardwired to look at the things that goes wrong with our life. That's the way it is. Our brain naturally focuses on the things that are wrong. In order to focus on the things that are right, it has to be an intentional and conscious decision here. So every time when I look at the regret, it's like somebody, on the other side of the line just pull the line and boom, I'm back off again, right? Now, the second thing here are failures. Now, failures are things that, no matter how much time you spent working on it, no matter how well-intentioned you are, it doesn't matter. It doesn't care whether you got good values, bad values, good intentions, bad intentions. When you do something and it fails, it simply fails. It just breaks down, right? And during my time, in this company that I love a lot called Seoul Garden, there are failures, obviously, right? There are corporate failures that I've made, and also at the same time, there are personal failures that I made. And if regret is like the hook, the fish hook that hooks your mouth, then failure, right, is like the jaws of death, like that kind of clamps you down and pulls you down, right? And every time when I look at my failures, right, I cannot help but feel that this clamp has clamped me down and refused to let me move from that position. And every time when I try to move away from the position, that clamp causes a lot of pain. It brings back a lot of memories about what I did wrong. It begins to accuse me of all the things that I did not do right? And that's what failures does to you and I here. It clamps us down, and it causes pain to us every time we try to do something here. And the last one here, obviously, is sudden loss. Now, sudden loss is a strange situation. When I left Seoul Garden, I left the company as its managing director, right? And then it's like overnight, I've lost my name card, I lost my title, I lost the benefits, I lost the entitlements and the embellishment that goes all together with that title and the authority. And it was a strange thing. It felt like all of a sudden I'm nobody, because all this while, that was my only identity. My identity, was to be the managing director of Seoul Garden. And when you take that away from me, suddenly this whole entire being is empty, right? I have no more purpose, I have no more meaning. And, that kind of brought me into into a really shocking, state of mind. It's as if I just woke up from a dream, except that now, I'm waking up to the reality of a nightmare here. So the whole idea is a really, really strange thing here. Well, what have I learned, from this experience in terms of reinvention here? I learned something. What you focus on grows bigger. So if I continue to focus on my regrets, I continue to focus, on my, what do you call that, on my failures, I focus on my sudden loss here, all this thing becomes bigger. And I learned something here. I learned that, look, I have the authority. I have the power to look away. I'm not saying that, I'm trying to be a Pollyanna or trying to be an idealistic person and ignore and pretend that none of this happened. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that, look, I want to focus on something more positive, something more joyful, something more hopeful, and make that grow bigger instead of being entrapped, by my regrets, by my failures, and by my sudden loss here. So regrets is not a burden. Regret is a school of life. Failures are not a clamp of jaws that ties me down, but failures, is the wisdom that lets me know, that I've become wiser and I know what to do better. And this whole idea of a nightmare of reality, gosh, I want to learn everything I can in my power to reinvent myself so that I can begin to turn the nightmare into greater impact, greater engagement, and greater joy here. So that's my story, my first story, right? And the second story, last one, right? And the second thing I've learned, is to reinvent, while you can. Now, as I think about it, one of the interesting things I realized was this. I wished at that point in time, this is more of a lesson rather than a regret. I wished at a point in time, while I was still the managing director of Soul Garden, that I'm not so 1,000% focused on just the Soul Garden job. But actually, I would have taken time out, my own personal time and all that, to begin to be, to be interested in other things, to learn new things that may not be related to the businesses at all. Because I realized, when I came up from the business in 2001, I knew next to nothing other than Soul Garden Matters, right? And I felt so empty, so lost, so directionless here. So this is the idea here, the second idea that I've learned, to reinvent while you still are able. So for those of you out there, if you're still working on a job and you're really working hard on a job, well done, good job. But don't just focus on the job. Do yourself a favor. Start looking at other interests in your life. Pursue some other passions in your life, or learn some new skills in your life, because you never know when you are going to do this. So one of the things I've learned in this is this, right? Don't just have one singular interest, but have a portfolio of interest here, right? And the third thing that I learned is, life does get better. So no matter how, where you are today, whether you've lost a job, and you're finding it difficult to find a new job, for the last few months, right? Or you find that you're directionless, you are not motivated, and you're very frustrated with life. Well, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. Don't focus on the things that's going wrong here, but focus on the things that can be more hopeful, that can be developed, that can grow. And when you do that, life definitely do get better. All right, cool. So now let me just share with you my second story here, doing the impossible. Now, one of the things that I am right now, of course, as you all know, is that I am the CEO and founder of Strength Asia. And one of the things that we do in Strength Asia is that we run a lot of Strengths Finder, engagement workshops for leaders and for managers and for executives, for companies both in Singapore and around Asia here. And we love doing these workshops, and we do it really, really, really well. And it was in one of these situations where one of the participants back in 2016, right, came to me and said, "Hey, Kimpong, love what you guys are doing here. Do you think you can do this in China?" Right? And I go like, my gosh, do I have to do this in Chinese? And he said, yeah, that's the next question I'm going to ask you. Can you do this in Chinese? And I go like, no way, I can't do this in Chinese, because at a point in time, back in 2016, I can't even string a sentence, in Chinese here. Okay, granted, I am a Singaporean. I grew up in Singapore. And Chinese is our compulsory second language here. But I'll tell you the truth here. Growing up in Singapore, one mistake that I made was to ignore the second language and to ignore Chinese. So by the time I graduated, from the pre-university in Singapore, my Chinese standard was at best, kindergarten standard day one. That's how bad it was. I can't even speak, more than 5-6 words, right? That was how bad it was. And then, I asked this participant, I say, when do you want me to run this workshop for your guys in China, right? Because she wanted me to bring it to China and use Mandarin to run the workshop here. And she said, well, I need to do it in 4 months' time. Can you do it in 4 months' time? And I'll tell you one thing. This, to me, learning Chinese is one thing, But learning Chinese to run a workshop in 4 months' time, now that is the game of the impossible. And when it comes to reinvention, right, it's all about the game of the impossible. It's about reinventing into something that you've never ever done before and never ever you could imagine that you're going to be doing it, right? And on the spot, I looked that person in the eye and I said, yes, we'll be there in China in 4 months' time. And, I wish I have the time to tell you how I did it, but essentially I was using, all kinds of methodology, all kinds of approaches to learn Chinese in every which way I can. I got some people to translate my materials all into Mandarin, and I go by memory, by rote, by learning and all kinds of stuff, right? And by the time it's 4 months, I appeared in China and I delivered my first ever workshop in Mandarin. Now I'll tell you one thing. It was incredible that I was able to do that. Why? Because number one, I don't speak Chinese at all. But today, 今天我可以用中文跟大家沟通，以前是不可能的。So when I think about that, my gosh, that is impossible, and that is the power and the joy, of reinvention here. I learned to speak Chinese and run a workshop in 4 months' time. And, of course, the techniques that I use are some things that, that I've been teaching clients all this time. How do you use your individual unique talents and strengths to do the very things that you really, really want to do? How do you go from potential to strength, by using your own unique talent themes here? Anyway, I did it, right? So what are the things that I've learned over here? Always say yes to impossible. Don't say no. Just because something is impossible, just something they cannot do, don't say, no, that's not possible. I can't do that. No, that's not possible. I don't want to talk about that. Reinvention, ladies and gentlemen, is about saying yes to the impossible. After all, the life that we live in, right? It is the game of the impossible. There are many things that you and I are doing today. They would seem to be impossible, on yesterday's or years ago, isn't it? The second thing that I've learned is this, be amazed with yourself. And this is something that I've learned over the years, since 2001, that every time I put myself on something that is near impossible or something that is totally unimaginable for Kimpong to do, like for example, what I'm doing right now, talking to you, in front of a camera and talking to you live on Zoom and talking to you live, on Facebook. Now that is something that is deemed to me as impossible 2 years ago. This is something that I don't even know how to do. I don't even know how to make sense out of it. But when the occasion came to it, the question that was asked by my team was this: Pong, can you do that? Because everybody needs to bring our business online now. Can we do that? And I tell you this, it was impossible, but we did it. And when you do that, right, you and your team members, and for me in this instance, for me, learning all these things, you're just incredibly amazed at what abilities, that lays hidden, within that being of yours here. All right. Now the third story. Tell me more. And this is a really interesting story here because it happens right in a tiny little sushi bar in Guangzhou, China about 2 years ago. So, Caris and myself, was actually in Guangzhou. Caris is my manager in Strength Asia. So she and I, we were in Guangzhou, running a workshop. I'm sorry, not Caris. Caris, Dina, and myself, the three of us, right? We were in Guangzhou, running a workshop in Guangzhou, right? And after the whole thing, the host, who's a good friend of mine, said, "Hey, Kimpong, let's go for dinner at this beautiful, Japanese restaurant." And we all, went to the sushi bar and we had great sushis over there, right? And then, during sushis and sakes and great conversations, right? She turned to me and said, "Hey, have you heard of this thing called sound wave, right?" And immediately I looked at her, my face, basically showed that, I have no idea what this thing is all about, right? But my response to her was, "No, I've not heard about that. Tell me more," right? That was what I told her. And then she said, sound wave, right? It is something that is really, really great, but nobody knows about it yet, right? So it's something relatively, good and new, but nobody knows about it. And that kind of makes my heart go like, ooh, this is really interesting, right? I love, there's something about Kimpong here where if he sees something that is really, really good and nobody knows about it, he gets really excited about it, right? So I got really excited about this. Like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then, she wanted to say this, and this tool, sound wave, right? It tells you, how you communicate with people, right? How you talk, and how are you being perceived perceived? How are you being heard by people? And I said, how do people do that? And she's go, well, they just do an assessment of questions. I said, really? You don't have to make a recording for people to kind of, listen to you to be able to do that? I said, no. It's just a simple questionnaire that you do. And the data, it's so robust. They can tell you, how you communicate, right? Do you communicate well? Do you communicate not so well? What are the risks of the way you're communicating and all that? And that makes my heart go a-flutter. I go like, my gosh, this is really, really interesting. Why is it that nobody knows about this, right? And then she goes on to say this, right? And then this tool, and after you do the assessment, it has the ability, it has the power to show you how you can talk in order to become more influential and more impactful. And this is the part where basically, I still remember I was holding my sake cup and I go like, my gosh, I said, this is an amazing discovery. This tool, why is it that nobody knows about it? Because in my mind, I know something to be true from my experiences in working with leaders, with managers, with executives all over the world here. And the thing that I realize is this: conversation and communication is everything. Everything that we do in our life, both at work, private, and friends and community, is all about conversation, right? Because leadership is conversation, relationships is conversation, and culture is conversation. If a leader has great conversation with their followers, it is very likely that the followers is going to look at the leaders and say, my gosh, that is a great leader, because they know how to communicate really well. They truly understand us, right? Relationship is conversation. Have you ever seen relationships where they got no conversations, but it is a great relationship? No, not really. If you've got lousy conversation in your relationships, it is likely that your relationships are not so great. What about culture? The culture in your organization, the culture in your workplace, the culture amongst your friends. If there are great conversation, that is a great culture. If there isn't, not so good. So in my mind, it was like bursting, with ideas on how important and how useful this tool could be for me in my company. And I'll tell you one thing. At that point in time, I wasn't really prepared to take on any new things for my company in Strength Asia, because we already have our own suite of products and we were quite happy with it. We were doing, fairly well, around the region here. But when my friend, showed me Soundwave, I go like, my gosh, tell me more. And the more she tells me, I say, tell me more, right? And the more she tells me, I go like, wow, this is incredible. Well, to cut the whole long story short, as of to date, everybody in my company, including some of the coaches on my platform, they've been all accredited, as Soundwave accredited practitioner coaches here. And we have begun, to begin to build new businesses, new engagement, new tools, new possibilities, right, with this Soundwave tool here. Now, why am I sharing all these things with you? Because to me, that's a reinvention. It's a reinvention of what I have been used to doing. So what have I learned, right, in this sushi bar story here? Well, if you want to reinvent yourself all over again, you got to be open, you got to be curious, and you got to keep telling people, tell me more. Even if it's something that you don't know and you don't like, tell the person, tell me more. Then make the decision on whether you want to take it on or not. And like I said, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because this is something really, really real. I want to give you a real example here. Now, I know for a fact that many of you out there during this season, you're considering, hey, how do I change my life? Should I become a coach, a facilitator, a trainer, or should I, equip myself with more capability to do this and that? I'm telling you one thing, right? Soundwave is the best kept secret in the world here, right? So go ahead and do something. If you're interested to find out more about Soundwave, please send us an email and we'll be more than happy to give you the information on how you can get, certified and accredited, as a Soundwave coach practitioner. So there are 4 things, that I think as I look back, at those 3 stories of my life here that I'm learning, right? One thing, we entitled this talk as Stop, Transform, and Evolve here. And that's essentially what it is. In everything that we do, if you want to reinvent yourself, no matter how busy you are, you must take time to pause and think about what you have done. And then begin to, get your heart set, get your minds ready and get your hands prepared to be able to get into that journey of transformation. And only then, and when that happens, can you begin to evolve into that bigger, better person of who you already are. So there are 4 things I've learned as I look through my 3 stories here. The first one is this: action or inaction have consequences. So reinvention is really a decision that you have to make. Do you want to reinvent your life? In other words, do you want to throw away the old? Do you want to modify the old? Or do you want to construct something brand new here, right? whether you do something or not, they always have its consequences here. One of the things, remember the Soul Garden story? One of the things I did not do was to really have a portfolio of interest here. And because of that, when I came out from Soul Garden, even though I was the managing director or whatever, right? When I came out, I was a nobody. There was nothing I could even focus on doing. I was totally lost. So, like I said, have a portfolio of interests. Don't just have one singular interest or one singular skill here, right? While you are able, while you are healthy, while you're energetic, while you're still, bright, right, and attentive, right? Go ahead and get yourself skilled up, get yourself, to learn more new things, connect yourself to more new networks. I'm going to share one thing with you really quickly right now. In today's day and age, if you're not on social media or on the internet, start getting there, because this is that thing that's going to really determine the future of how businesses are going to be run. In fact, it's already determining how businesses are beginning to be run, from now onwards. The third thing is success is action. Success is not perfection, but success is action. It's about not knowing, what you know or not know, whether it can be successful or not, whether it's a perfect plan or not. No. It's about success is action, and action is learning and calibration, and then you start all over again. And the more you do it, the more you try, the more likelihood is that you can become more successful. There's only a caveat here that I'm going to share with you. Whatever you try, don't try to lose your house in the process of it. Don't try to sell your soul in the process of it. Be smart, right, when you're trying things here, all right? And the last one here is do things that make you come alive, and not just things that keeps you alive. So very often, we do things that gives us a job, gives us a career, and we just stay on and hang on to that, right? And we forget about those very things that make us who we are, become the very best version of who we are, and make us come alive in the things that we do. My experience in all these years, regarding my own life and helping the lives of people around me, is that when you begin to invest your time, talents, and resources into the things that makes you come alive, you're more likely to get greater joy and greater outcome than if you were to just do things that keep you alive. So that's it. These are the 4 things here. And if you're really interested to find out a little bit more about how to reinvent yourself all over again, well, we have this class called the Reframe Masterclass that really, really will help folks like you and I who wants to find out more about our purpose, about our meaning, and how do we reinvent our life, our careers, or whatever, all over again. So we have the Reframe Masterclass that's coming up on the 31st of August to the 2nd of September. It's 3-day, over 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and it's going to be an online class here. After this talk, after this sharing here, my colleagues will be sending to your emails, more information on the Reframe Masterclass. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to the talk. This is our last talk for the series. We're going to take a few weeks of breaks here, and after that, we're going to come back with a totally brand new series here, and we'll reach out to you, via email here. And for those in Facebook, like our Strength Asia Facebook so they can get all the updated information as and when we release them. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a great day. Be safe and be strong, and learn to stop, pause, transform, and evolve. Reinvent yourself. Take care. Bye-bye.
Gotta try this a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks that I know. Getting tired of talking, and I need more of a show right now. It's time that you made your mind up. 'Cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking. Going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day.